an in-depth look at the people and events that shape our community. This is Iowa in Focus.
This week, one major party presidential candidate deals with a renewed scandal while both of them are in Cedar Rapids. We host the state party chairs in a roundtable discussion about the state of 2016 in Iowa. Welcome to Iowa in Focus. We're giving context to what happens in the headlines and out on the campaign trail. That all starts with the barnstorm. Friday in Cedar Rapids, it was a tale of two sides of the Cedar River. Hillary Clinton was in town, but not without a lot of controversy. While supporters were coming to the Nubo City Market to see her speak, FBI Director James Comey said that the FBI was opening another investigation now into her emails, but didn't release much more information about why. Several weeks ago, he had ended the email controversy when he said that there was nothing for a prosecutor to charge Clinton with. When Clinton did take the stage, she didn't talk about the latest investigation at all. She was in the New Bohemia district, which just 1 month before was a complete ghost town because it was evacuated to get ready for possible flooding. Her message about flood protection for the city hit home.
The progress that you've made in rebuilding Cedar Rapids, especially right here in the Nubo district, proves what's possible when we work together to solve our challenges.
It wouldn't take long, though, until the Clinton campaign fired back at the FBI. Campaign chair John Podesta released a statement saying that Director Comey's letter refers to emails that have come to light in an unrelated case, but we have no idea what those emails are, and the director himself notes they may not even be significant. It is extraordinary that we would see something like this just 11 days out from a presidential election, and the director owes it to the American people to immediately provide the full details of what he is now examining. We are confident this will not produce any conclusions different from the one the FBI reached back in July. Then Clinton herself gave a press conference in Des Moines where local media from Iowa was not invited to attend. She wanted to address the issue herself.
Voting is already underway in our country. So the American people deserve to get the full and complete facts immediately. The director himself has said he doesn't know whether the emails referenced in his letter are significant or not. I'm confident, whatever they are, will not change the conclusion reached in July. Therefore, it's imperative that the Bureau explain this issue in question, whatever it is, without any delay.
All this set up Donald Trump's visit to the McGrath Amphitheater in Cedar Rapids, just on the other side of the river, hours after Hillary Clinton left. He was actually an hour and a half late himself, but once he did roll in, he got some of his biggest cheers from the latest FBI news.
But you know what? What happened today, starting with the FBI, maybe the system will become a little less rigged.
Whatever the facts of the case, the damage essentially has already been done. The political punishment from this kind of announcement with just 11 days until the election has nothing to do with whatever charges may actually result from the latest developments. It won't be the sole reason that either side wins or loses the election, but it does change how both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump now handle the next 9 days of this election cycle. The week kicked off with some pretty bad news for Democrats anyway. The Affordable Care Act costs are going up, with deductibles now averaging $6,000 across the board and going as high as $12,000 before some insurance plans ever kick in. On the campaign trail, that makes President Obama's landmark legislation a prime target now for Republicans, like when Mike Pence was in Fort Dodge.
In fact, former President Clinton actually said premiums are going up. Coverage is going down. He said it's, quote, the craziest thing in the world. You know, I guess even with the Clintons, sometimes truth happens.
After he left that speech, the Pence plane actually slid off the runway at LaGuardia Airport in New York City. Everybody was okay. Now let's go inside Iowa politics, talking about the people not trying to move into the White House. In Black Hawk County, a race for the County Board of Supervisors seat got a lot of unwanted attention. Democratic candidate Chris Schwartz woke up to having his political signs being vandalized outside with anti-gay slurs written on one of them. There was also a reference to Leviticus 20:13 on his front door. That is a Bible verse saying that gay people should be killed. Schwartz is the only openly gay candidate in that race, and he says that until now, the race had been pretty civil.
It's very hurtful to people. You see all the LGBTQ teen suicides that happen around the country, all the depression that happens. I talk to teens here in our community that deal with these things on a daily basis.
Schwartz says he doesn't know who did it, but over the past few days, he has been attacked online by a Facebook group called the Cedar Valley Patriots for Christ. They had been speaking out against Schwartz's support for new events like Pride Fest in the Waterloo area. They offered to pay for some of the damages, but their leader also suggested that Schwartz himself may have staged the vandalism. Schwartz denies that, and his opponents are now speaking out against that kind of vandalism.
I was in complete shock that somebody would do that. It's insane. I can't believe how bad this election cycle has gotten.
First reaction is who's stupid enough and who's vicious enough and who's hateful enough to do it.
In parts of the state, counties have been examining their minimum wages, and at least Lynn and Johnson County have already voted to raise them over the next few years. Cities have the choice to opt out of that kind of increase if they want to, but in Des Moines, Governor Terry Branstad weighed in, saying that he does want to improve the income for people making minimum wage.
We want to do it in a way that's not going to drive small businesses out of business or actually destroy jobs.
But then he was quick to jump on Twitter saying that he doesn't back a statewide minimum wage hike and that it's just time to carefully review the issue. His Twitter continued with the governor wants to work with the Iowa legislature when their next session starts to figure out how Iowa compares to its neighboring states. In Lynn County, voters got a chance to see both senators together at once. They were honoring Senator Grassley, and the discussion quickly turned to the budding relationship between him and junior Senator Joni Ernst. Grassley had served with Democratic Senator Tom Harkin for the past 30 years in the Senate, and Grassley said most of his time his vote was canceled out by his fellow Iowan. West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito says that Grassley and Ernst are constantly sharing their individual expertise on the floor.
You can see them on the floor when we're getting ready to have a vote. They're always consulting one another. They keep very close touch. I mean, I'm kind of envious in a way because I see how well they work together and really provide a united front for the state of Iowa.
State Democrats brought through some Olympic power to eastern Iowa. Olympian Michelle Kwan came to the University of Iowa with a stop for Congressman Dave Loebsack talking about early voting. After Kwan's skating career was over, she got a job at the State Department working with Hillary Clinton and then joined the campaign well before the Iowa caucuses. Now she's the surrogate outreach coordinator. Loebsack is in a re-election race with Republican Dr. Christopher Peters. After 10 years in Congress, Loebsack did not get the Gazette's endorsement.
You want all the endorsements, obviously, but I feel pretty good about the work that I've done, and so I'm going to do what I can to, get as many endorsements as I can, ultimately on Election Day.
Iowa's first two district candidates finally came face-to-face this week for their one and only debate of the cycle. They touched on issues like flood protection in Cedar Rapids, where Vernon criticized Rod Blum and the Iowa delegation for not doing enough to get the money appropriated to the city. Blum countered, saying that actually giving that money out is being held up by federal formulas that disadvantage smaller communities like Cedar Rapids. Then they got to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's a trade deal that the president backs and that Hillary Clinton started to set in motion when she was Secretary of State. But during the campaign, she's now said that she's against the final deal that was reached after she had left. Donald Trump also does not support the deal. But in the first district, Vernon says that she's against it. Blum says he's reserving judgment.
Free trade just is whatever the market will bear. Fair trade makes sure that everyone gets a little piece of the action. And I think that's much more American, and it's what I'm all about.
And now we're seeing record harvests, and we're seeing farmers selling their crops at below cost. So they're losing money. We can't have them losing money year after year after year. So we need to increase the markets for our products grown here in Iowa. TPP sounds like, but I'll withhold judgment, sounds like that would be a good vehicle to do that.
But right before that debate, the Daily Caller, which is a conservative website launched by a former Dick Cheney advisor, published a story pointing out that Monica Vernon laid off as many as half of her employees when she was running her research company. That is a big deal because she and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee have been attacking Rod Blum for laying off workers at his business. It ended with both of them talking about the challenges of actually running a business.
I had to get my people around and say, look, we don't have very many contracts coming in. How can I want to keep you on. And people said, look, I'll take part pay. What I did was I didn't take any pay until I could pay them all back.
If you're in business long enough and you get to be a big enough size, yeah, there's going to be business downturns, and sometimes you have to lay people off. Let me tell you, having said that, it is the absolute toughest decision a chief executive officer has to make. I didn't sleep for nights having to think about telling people they're going to be laid off.
Coming up after the break on Iowa in Focus, we chat with one of the representatives trying hard to turn Iowa's 1st district from red to blue. Welcome back. Wisconsin's Democratic Representative Mark Pocan took a long and painful path to politics. As a young man, he was beaten after he came out of a gay bar. He's open about his sexuality and represents the Madison area now. He works with the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and he's fighting hard to get Monica Vernon elected against Rod Blum in the 1st Congressional District.
We're 30 seats down, which isn't that difficult. If you think about it, we lost 71 seats in the House and Senate back in 2010. So 30 seats, even though with some of the gerrymandering is a little more difficult, still possible. I think what we're seeing is the fact that a lot of Republican candidates and incumbents either have been part of the obstruction that we've seen in Congress since 2010. Unfortunately, there's the Tea Party and what they call themselves the Freedom Caucus that literally have voted to shut down government. They voted to raise retirement age to 70, instead of 67. They want to do all these things that clearly aren't in the best interest of the middle class and the average person in Iowa or Wisconsin, where I come from. And I think those folks are the ones that if they continue to stand by someone after some of these really outrageous comments, they continue to do these practices in Congress that don't allow us to function. I mean, that's fundamentally the problem. It's not Democrats or Republicans fighting. It's the Tea Party and the mainstream Republicans fighting. And because there's this view that somehow they don't support government, but they run for office to run it, yet they don't. They want to shut us down when they get the opportunity. That's dangerous.
How does that change make either easier or harder your job in the Progressive Caucus to go out and recruit members to come in and get people elected to do that when you have these accusations out there and when you can run specifically against a candidate who's in the Freedom Caucus?
The values that we put forth as a Progressive Caucus, things like protecting and strengthening Social Security, trying to make higher education more affordable, trying to grow people's paychecks. I think most people that I know in Northeast Iowa, in my corner of Wisconsin, I only live 70 minutes from Dubuque, in my district. And that's exactly where I live, is that close. Those are the things that people care about. So I think, we do pretty well when we advocate those issues because we're advocating what the public wants.
When Bernie Sanders started to kind of, slow his campaign down a little bit, he talked about having to win lower level, so state house seats, things like that. How much does that fight that you guys are having in D.C. start in local state capitals, trying to get people elected essentially to try to undo some of that gerrymandering?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Iowa, by the way, is probably one of the best examples in the country when it comes to redistricting, right? You have a citizens panel. All the districts, you could argue, are competitive, especially if they are open. It should be that way everywhere. And kudos to the way that you've done the law. But that really does matter in many other states where you'll have a district that looks like a bug that was splattered, and that's someone's congressional district. There's nothing in common with other parts of it. So that is one of the factors that clearly we've seen in Florida, Texas, and some other states that needs to be addressed. But, in Iowa, you have the model for what should be the national model. And I wish we had in my state of Wisconsin, where citizens draw the lines and it's not elected officials picking their voters. Instead, it's voters picking their elected officials, and that's the way it should be.
Cedar Rapids just went through a flood, second big one in 8 years. Monica was part of the 2008 revival, but now she's not in office, and her challenger is or rather the person she's challenging is the incumbent, and he gets to kind of hold on to, well, I'm kind of banging down the door of the Army Corps of Engineers. How much does that hurt somebody, even like Monica in the position that she's in, knowing a lot about flood recovery, just because the other guy's in office right now?
Well, two things. One, I serve on the budget committee with Rod Blum, and I've seen his votes and what he does. He has not been necessarily responsive to other people's crises, and I don't know if he's going to be the most effective in trying to get this done. Having said that, I also know Monica Vernon, and I called her in the middle of that crisis, and she had taken a lot of time off of her campaign to still try to deal with it because she was a point person the last time it happened. So, again, I think we all do better when we all do better, right? That's an upper Midwest sort of thing I think people in Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin kind of believe. We have to have representatives who think that way, because if we help that crisis in New York or the flood in Louisiana, they're going to help us in Iowa and Wisconsin when we have our flooding. And I think it's an approach that Monica certainly brings because of personal experience, and she'll be more effective because of it in dealing with federal agencies, especially if it turns out we have a Democratic president, which I think we're going to have hopefully on November 8th.
Coming up next on Iowa in Focus, we explore this past week's roundtable discussion about the state of politics in Iowa in 2016. Welcome back. In the real story this week, we're taking a deeper look at the town hall discussion that CBS 2 and Fox 28 just hosted this past Thursday. Our goal was to pull together people from both parties to talk about issues affecting Iowans in 2016. We started with the presidential election, but we quickly got into how both sides treat each other, especially after just this week when the county supervisor race was marred by anti-gay slurs in Black Hawk County. Moderator Mark Hyman asked University of Iowa political science professor Carrie Covington about seeing this kind of animosity everywhere.
The insults we've seen and the personal attacks and so forth, and if so, is that perhaps a reason why we're seeing events like this at the local level? Have we just kind of debased the whole system? We lowered the bar?
That's a tricky question. And I mean, as Jeff has mentioned, you can go back in history and find some pretty debasing campaigns in the past. But I would say certainly in the last 30, 40 years, we've seen a lot more animosity in this contest than we've seen in the past. And I think there are factors beyond the particular personalities of the candidates that help explain that. Voters are increasingly distant from one another in terms of party. Public opinion polls show that Democrats have a very low view of Republicans. Republicans have a very low view of Democrats. A majority of both parties think the other party is a threat to our nation's well-being.
Water quality in the state of Iowa has also been an issue since Des Moines Waterworks sued 3 rural Iowa counties over putting farming nitrates into the water. The governor tried to make progress on this last legislative session, but it never got any traction.
Well, first of all, I think the water quality in Des Moines is more about grabbing headlines than it is finding a solution, or they wouldn't have approached the problem in that way. What you've got is a situation that you have some side effects in rural Iowa of growing crops, of feeding the nation, and I might add, including the waterworks in Polk County. Last time I heard, they didn't have a cornfield in their building. So there needs to be there needs to be a cooperative effort there. The House Republicans, backed by Governor Branstad, put a bill putting millions of dollars on Mike Gronstall's desk, and it wasn't even debated. Even if it wouldn't have been passed, you need to at least have a debate about that, have a conversation about that. There are ways to fix the water quality issue, and I might add, it's a Republican governor that brought that up. There is a way to fix this water quality issue without immediately going to raising taxes. In regards to education, that's always going to be a major factor in the state. I mean, that's the biggest chunk of the state budget, and there should be a conversation about that. You work on that particular solution with all people there, not by making crazy promises like Mrs. Clinton has about free education for all. If the government runs education, it's going to cost more.
You have a response?
I have a big response. The proposal that Governor Branstad and the Republicans were talking about took away from education. Exactly what we were talking about we don't need to do. We need to have clean water, but we need to have our kids educated. This isn't either or, this is both. And so it's really, I think it was disingenuous to act like we could take it away from education to have clean water. We have to have a comprehensive plan that everyone can agree on. And the Democrats have been on this issue, but we haven't been getting a lot of bipartisan support. So we need to have a comprehensive plan that actually takes in all the interests of all the parties so we can go forward on this. But taking it away from education is not what we need.
That is not the bill I was referring to. That was the bill that Governor Branstad proposed. The House Republicans did not even take that bill up for debate. The House Republican bill that later garnered the support of Governor Branstad did not touch the silo fund in education and actually put millions of dollars for it. That's the bill that I believe Mike Gronstall should have debated.
We wrapped up by talking about the winners and losers of the 2016 election. Polling might be skewed if turnout reaches unexpected levels. The media has been attacked by both sides, and establishment politics has become an easy target for disgruntled voters.
Winners and losers, I think the big loser is going to be that we're going to have more division in this country. And I think the next president, she is going to have to bring us together And I think that's going to be the really hard thing to put the genie back in the bottle about racism and sexism.
And Dr. Kaufman, I'm almost out of time, but I want to get a plug in about millennials. Data suggests they're not going to turn out in large numbers to vote. What can we do better to get them involved? And I got about 30 seconds for your response.
Talk directly to them. Talk about issues they care about. Don't patronize them with free education claims. Talk to them about government getting in their lives, government looking over their shoulder, and never, ever underestimate that they get it. They can actually look 30 years down the line and understand things like the national debt and such. And one quick thing, the fact you're doing this right now and have Andy and I up here, and I know I feel like I've said everything I can say, kudos to you. Absolutely. You're doing it exactly the way it needs to be, in my opinion.
Coming up after the break on Iowa in Focus, the big attack on one presidential nominee's spot in Hollywood. Welcome back. Now we look at their voice. It's what your officials are posting on social media. Republican Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz had previously said he wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump after those 2005 tapes came out. He told a local Utah TV station he was out because of the latest news, but now Chaffetz is back in the fold. He tweeted out that he won't defend or endorse Donald Trump, but that Chaffetz will vote for him. He says Hillary Clinton is that bad and that she's bad for America. Police in Los Angeles say they've arrested the man now who smashed Donald Trump's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The man was dressed as a construction worker. There's even this video of him taking a pickaxe to the star. He says he did it because he doesn't like Donald Trump's behavior. Every week we end with the week ahead, a chance for you to see what the campaigns are up to. Tomorrow, Mike Pence spends much of his Halloween in Florida, trying to pick up that swing state. Also tomorrow, Hillary Clinton is in Ohio, Tim Kaine is in North Carolina, and we're down to just 9 days now till Election Day. Thanks for watching. Be sure to tune in next week to get the clear facts right here on Iowa in Focus.